Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. You know, Dr. Roger Leir is one of the world's most important leaders in physical evidence research involving the field of ufology. He and a surgical team have performed numerous surgeries on apparent alien abductees. He's got some stories next that will just chill you on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. As I mentioned, Dr. Roger Leir, he's way at the forefront of the field of ufology, and his surgical team performs a number of surgeries on apparent alien abductees. I witnessed many years ago with producer Tom Danheiser a surgery with Dr. Roger Leir and his team. It was one of the most baffling things I've ever seen. We've played that tape numerous times on Coast to Coast AM. Roger's back with us with some incredible stories, back also from the Bay Area UFO Expo. Roger, how are you, my friend?
Oh, very good, George. And, I'm not in the prediction business, but I will stick my neck out and say the folks that are listening tonight are going to hear a Coast show, which I believe will go down in history.
I think you're right. I think you're right indeed. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing over the past few years, Roger.
Well, we've done, as you mentioned, a number of surgeries for the removal of objects which apparently are alien implants. Alien for two reasons. Number one, they're alien to the human body because they don't belong there. And alien for a second reason is that they probably belong to a sophisticated civilization that's far, far advanced of our own. Now, we take these objects out. We essentially study them, look at them from the outside in. We look at the things that they can do, both chemically, physically, electronically. And then we compile this data and report to the public what we found. And we found some astounding things, which I'm going to talk about tonight. And these will be based only on the 15th and 16th surgeries which were recently performed. Now, we've got some scientists that are going to come on the show with us. One is a material scientist, and his field of expertise is nanotechnology. The other one is experimental nuclear physicist who has been on the program before. They're now both on the board of ANS Research, and I just can't wait to get to the end. But we've got to have a little background here first.
Roger, you're a doctor, and when you were going to school, surely you didn't go to school to try to dig for and uncover implants in people or alleged abductees. How did this all happen for you?
You're absolutely right, George. No, if someone had told me I'd been doing this 40 years ago, I would have said, you're halfway to the loony bin. No, I got interested in this subject, actually a long time ago when my father brought in the newspaper with the Roswell headline. But I've always had an interest in flying and astronomy. In fact, I wanted to be an astronomer, but my math grades were no good, so instead I went into a medical field and became a podiatric surgeon, and I've been in practice now for 46 years. Then something caught my interest, and it was at a MUFON meeting. When I heard that, I said, MUFON? What is that, the dessert? Muffins or what is it? So there's where I was. I knew absolutely nothing about the
Mutual UFO Network. To those who don't know what we're talking about,
right? That's one of the largest organizations in the world. So here I was at a MUFON meeting, and it was a wonderful experience. Had a great speaker, It was local to where I live, and a very, very pleasant evening. And there was homemade chocolate chip cookies. So
Perfect.
how could you beat that? So that got me started, and then I started writing a periodical for a periodical as an investigative reporter called The Vortex. And that led me to someone who showed me some x-rays, naturally, of a foot, and he touted that the objects in the x-ray were alien implants, and I turned around, laughed, and walked away. But the individual who was with me brought me back, and I said, these look like objects that were left over maybe from a previous surgery. So I said, why don't you just simply take them out and see what they are? And he said, well, I think the lady would like to have that done, but she has no money and no insurance. So I ascertained that she did not live in California, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, you bring her to California, and I'll do it all free, because I figured, well, it's worth a little bit of my time to have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have some fun and prove this is absolute poppycock. So we did 2 surgeries, and it went on from there. And with each one I've done, we've been able to get a little more scientific data. And, of course, we found out very strangely, George, that this takes money. So after I spent a great deal of my own, and my wife almost killed me, we were almost broke. We formed an organization called ANS Research, went through the paperwork to get a nonprofit status.
Good.
And we've gotten some outside funds. I have to thank, several people for these last 2 surgeries. One is Jaime Maussan from Mexico, investigative reporter.
Great investigator.
Yeah, just really terrific investigator and a wonderful person. He donated funds and offered to film this, and then he was able to get international Telemundo to put up some money, and it was filmed. The show was recently shown on the 25th and 26th of this month, not long ago.
Super.
Last month, October. And they really did a wonderful job. Of course, it's in Spanish, but I understand they're going to send me a copy with English subtitles. So we got to thank them for.
Roger, of the 15 or 16 cases that you've done, some of them, I'm sure, the objects ended up being natural, right? Or something left from a surgery, something like that. Out
of the 16 cases, we had 17 objects. One of the 17 objects was a very expensive piece of glass. The reason I say expensive was it wasn't expensive when the person stepped on it, but it was expensive to do the analysis.
To pull it out, yeah.
Well, to take it out and analyze it, because it had properties of both glass and crystal. But it's only been one out of 17 objects that didn't have any scientific interest. Now, that's an unbelievable statistic. So part of that, I believe, is the effort that we make to investigate these cases before we ever do a surgery.
Give me your overall perspective on what you think these are and why they're in people.
Well, I think from what we've learned so far, and I'll go into certainly more detail later, but I think they're communication, electronic, and let's put it this way, extremely advanced communication, electronic communication devices, which are relating information to someone somewhere that probably put them in, and it has something to do with the function of the human body, probably down to the DNA.
Is the information about the specifics of the person that's carrying the implant, or is it about their environment? What are they sending back?
Well, we haven't deciphered the information. We haven't gotten there yet. That's going to be one of the, we found that a certain number of these objects are putting out radio waves. And in one of the cases, we find that this is a radio wave in the FM band, and I got a secure chart from the FCC through someone who I can't mention, but it turned out to be a deep space fixed or mobile communication frequency. Now, it brings the question to mind, why would an advanced civilization use a radio wave for anything? Like Uncle Stan Friedman says, a silly effort to investigate. An advanced civilization is not going to be operating with radio waves. So that only lets me believe that perhaps somebody else is piggybacking or listening to this same information. But if you want to know why, I mean, it's safe for me to render an opinion, but that's all it is. It's an opinion. Sure. I think that the human race is being genetically manipulated. And this may not be the first time in man's history, because if you look at the historical record of man and the changes that have occurred, you might say that this has happened previously.
Interesting. Roger, what about government? What governments are aware of this? All of them?
I think that the knowledge and the information in relation to the subject and the abductions and implants and the whole ball of wax is now probably out of the hands of governments as we know them completely. I think it's in the hands of multinational private industry. And I think some people in government here, UK, Canada, other parts of the world, have knowledge, but I think the knowledge is select and few. You say, well, above top secret, cosmic top secret, eyes only, whatever. Whatever the clearances these guys have are far beyond what the average intelligence clearances are.
Is there any benefit to us, these implants? I mean, are we learning anything? Can we learn anything from these?
Well, I may be a cockeyed optimist, but I think that one of the salvations of the world is coming from without and not from within. I don't think this is something new. As I said, I think this has happened before. I think there's quite a history of things that have happened on this earth, millions of years ago till now, and it's still happening. I mean, we're on the brink of something, as you just alluded to in the news broadcast. The thing that's going on with Iran and Israel, the United States, atomic warfare. Well, look what happened at almost the brink of World War III with Russia, with the Soviet Union. We had two incidents, one in the United States, particularly maybe two in the United States, and at least one we know of in Russia, where somebody else from somewhere else intervened at the missile silos and put a stop to it. And it was shortly after that when the Berlin Wall came down. So there is external influence on mankind, and I think that the objects that individuals have implanted in them are for the benefit of mankind. Like I say, I could be a cockeyed optimist, but I can't see any other reason.
Roger, with all this, David Jacobs, of course, noted researcher, UFO researcher, and one of the few, believes that we're being genetically altered for a planet takeover. Do you agree with that?
In part. I agree, only in part. I think, number one, there may be numerous advanced entities that are visiting this planet, and they may have different agendas. David Jacobs, I've discussed this with him before, and in relation to a hybrid program, I think there may be a group that is making hybrids. For what purpose, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's in conjunction with another group that's genetically manipulating the human race. What if it didn't work?
Well, that's true. Now to you, Roger Leir. Tell us of the involvement here of Bob Coons and set the stage for this story.
Well, we've gotten to the point in looking at these objects that have been removed where we're looking deep into the metals, the things that put them together. They're the basic elements, and we finally gotten down to maybe the atomic structure of how they're put together and the high strangeness that has occurred. So in doing this, Bob volunteered to take a look at some of this material and the evidence that we were producing from the laboratories, and became very interested in it and very generously published an open letter in response to what he felt about these materials. He eventually became a board member for ANS Research, and in just recently now with the new things that we have found, Bob has stuck his neck out and laid out a theory which is just going to blow your minds. This is brand new information. This is the first time that's ever been done. Bob has looked at the time it takes for an isotope, which is an atomic small particle of an element, and how long this takes to decay, how long it takes to become perhaps another element, such as boron going to beryllium, two elements. And then he's put forth a theoretical formula in relation to the age of the universe. And he will explain that, of course, in detail. And we've gotten some idea. Now, Stan Friedman says, if you're going to go shopping for a loaf of bread and you live in New York, you're not going to go to New Jersey. So if we assume that the entities that are using this material come from the same areas where the material may be, and then we've got some surprising distances that we're going to hear about.
And tell us, who is scientist John Smith?
Scientist John Smith is, he's not. John Smith is a patient.
All right.
But the scientist Steve Colburn is going to look at John Smith's work and the work that we've done on the 60s surgery, which was Ron Noel. Some of these names are pseudonyms, as we don't usually like to use patients' names. But these are both very interesting cases with some similarities and surprising results. Steve is an eminent scientist and works in the field of material science with a specialty in nanotechnology. So he's going to come at this from a similar area, but looking at it a little bit differently.
Okay, he'll join us next hour. Let's bring in Bob Kuhns back on Coast to Coast. Hey, Bob.
Hello, George. It's an honor to be with you again.
Likewise. How did you get involved in this?
Okay. In 2002, I was a conventional physicist involved in particle physics, high-energy physics, relativistic heavy ion physics, things like that. And I took a photograph of a dish-shaped object at noontime on a bright sunny day. This is not a thing glowing in the night. And I got good pictures of it, and that started me into this whole area of interest in UFOs. And then I did an anti-gravity experiment, went on and on and on, and now I've come up with a connection with Dr. Lear and his group. And let me tell you, George, they're doing good science. I've been at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and I've been at Stanford, and I know what good science is. They're doing good science as best they can for a small group. And there's a report on my website that people who are interested in the subject should read. That's drkuntz.com, a report on implants. So I've investigated this very carefully, George. I didn't take anything for granted. I investigated everything. I interviewed implantees. I analyzed the report by Steve Colburn. I analyzed a separate report by Dr. Russell Vernon Clark, which was also analyzed by Steve Colburn. And my conclusion is that this is most probably extraterrestrial material being placed in human beings of import, and perhaps common citizens as well. Say
that one more time, Bob. I want everybody to hear what you just said. You're a PhD. You're a nuclear physicist. Tell us again. What did you just say?
It appears to me that there's an extraterrestrial civilization or entities who are placing in individuals objects, which we call implants, small pieces of iron, cobalt, nickel, with traces of iridium, so like meteoric iron, and they're placing it in individuals in this country and perhaps around the world as well. And so it's kind of astounding, but that's my conclusion. I think that other scientists, if they approach this honestly, they'd reach the same conclusion.
What do you think they're doing? Why are they doing this, Bob?
Well, I don't know exactly. It looks to me like this device, the one I analyzed from Steve Colburn's report, is I think it's a remote listening device. It's a strange material. It's iron with cobalt with nickel and traces of a large amount of iridium. Iridium is normally only found in meteorites. This looks like meteoric iron, but it's got a larger amount of iridium in it than normally we'd find in a meteorite. And it's also got a surface coating on it that's very strange that appears to be sensitive to phonons, to sound. So it looks like the surface it looks like it's a device that's designed to intercept sound waves and retransmit them. Oh, that's another thing. These objects emit electromagnetic radiation. You can't. The ordinary piece of iron is not going to be emitting electromagnetic radiation, but these do, and they emit at certain frequencies, scalar frequencies that I'm quite familiar with. 93 megahertz, for example, 15 megahertz, and on down. So, they're emitting electromagnetic radiation. They appear to be programmed to absorb sound waves. I think they retransmit, but listen to this. This is incredible. Excuse my voice is breaking. They self-organize.
You're that excited, Bob, huh?
Well, this is extraordinary, George. I've been doing science for 40 years, and I helped discover important particle. I did some work on it, but anyhow, they appear to self-organize. You break these implants up, George. Listen to this. They reassemble. Now, if you break them today, I broke a big magnet. A magnet will not reassemble, but these devices reassemble. Self-reassembly. That's intelligent material. We're talking about intelligent programming intelligence into materials. Self-reassembly. There are carbon nanotubes in these devices, and we don't find carbon nanotubes in nature.
Let's find out for a moment from Roger Leir. Roger, how big are the devices, and where are they generally found?
Well, the one consistent finding we have is that they are found usually superficially in the body, but yet near a bone. So there's a lot of places that you can think of, certainly arms, toes, fingers, jaw, a number of different places that meet that criteria. And I believe they are placed there for specific reasons. One of the reasons might just simply be if you're going to do these in mass and you want to get them done in a short period of time, this is an easy way to do it. Now, remember, they have no visible signs of entry. There's no portal of entry. Now, in one case, which was John Smith, he had a couple of blood spots that was on the toe where we found this. But after a day or so, those spots disappeared. And by the time he saw me, there was absolutely nothing there. This is a complex problem, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort to try and figure all these things out. But before Bob leaves us, I want him to talk about his formula for determining where these might come from in the universe.
All right. Let's do that.
Okay, let me just mention before I'll get to that in a second. Dr. Russell Vernon Clark is a PhD chemist who also reached the same conclusion I did. He's from the University of California. A number of years ago, he analyzed this Roswell artifact that Dr. Leir found, and the isotope ratios on that thing were off the wall. It's unbelievable. 20% isotope shift. Okay, now, as far as the time period, my conclusion is that the implant taken from John Smith was approximately, and there are some assumptions here, I came from an area of the universe that was in advance of ours by 90 million years.
90 million years. That's amazing.
Yeah, now that's a 2% isotope shift, and I assume that it's a weak electroweak decay that takes approximately 1 billion years half-life. So that's how I came up with this 90 million year figure. Now, that could be wrong. There could be other factors. I believe that the scalar electromagnetic radiation can shift isotopes. So, but I think we're talking that's an approximately good figure to use. And but these isotope shifts, very, very unusual, extremely, and this self-organization. How in the world do they do that? I don't know. If you break anything up, it generally doesn't reassemble. I mean, when was the last time you broke a glass and the glass reorganized itself and came back together? That doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. No, does not happen.
So I would say 90 million years. If I had to guess where this came from, if you have a time and you need a velocity to get a distance, and I don't really have a velocity, but let me just guess. I'm sort of, as an educated guess, I'd say maybe 50 light years would be the closest.
50. And where would that put us, Roger?
I was just going to have Bob tell us where would that put us, let's say, in the Milky Way galaxy.
Well, the nearest star is Alpha Centauri. That's about 4.3 light years away. So 50 light years would be what?
10 times that. Plus.
10 times that, or something like 10 times that. So that's an approximate. Now, 90 million years, as far as light years go, the galaxy is approximately 100,000 light years across. The nearest galaxy, I think, is about 10,000 light years away. There's a nearby galaxy, but anyhow, galactic distances are 100,000 light years approximately. So I would say it's coming from this galaxy, and the closest would be, I would say, somewhere within 50 light years.
And they've obviously developed a different propulsion system, Bob, right?
Oh, absolutely. John Hutchison, by the way, John Hutchison sold his laboratory to a company, laboratory in Germany. The United States is we didn't do anything. We didn't follow it up. Now the Germans are developing anti-gravity in their laboratory using John Hutchison's equipment. And also the Russians offered, two Russian scientists who did a very important anti-gravity and free energy experiment, offered it to the Department of Energy, and the Department of Energy turned it down. This is crazy. But anyhow, yes, anti-gravity, and also hyperspace, transport, and the laws of physics. We don't have the right laws of physics, George. We don't. Ed Leeds-Gallion had all kinds of ideas that have been
Coral
verified.
Castle.
Yeah. Yeah, we think we know so much. We need to really learn what the laws of physics are.
Why implant human beings, Bob? I mean, they must be doing. If they're doing it here, they got to be doing it throughout. I
would say it's
galaxy.
a remote intelligence gathering, but maybe that comes from my background. That's my guess. They're gathering intelligence on our civilization. Possibly they don't want us out in space with our nuclear weapons and barbarity. I don't know.
Well,
they're gathering intelligence. I would say they're gathering intelligence.
Maybe I can add something to that. I did a study on 17 functional growth characteristics in children over a 40-year period, and I found that they've been advanced from 16 to 86%. Now that, by any way you look at it, is not evolution, not even short evolution. The human race is changing. The kids that are born within the last 50 to 75 years are not the same human as myself or my friends. There's something different about them. If you listen to what children say and really listen, they're getting knowledge, but they're not getting it necessarily out of a book from a teacher or television or their parents. They have this particular knowledge that seems to be, maybe part of the universe. So things are changing in human beings, and that's why I came to the conclusion that perhaps one group, maybe not all of them, is regenetically engineering human beings so that we stop the god-awful stuff that we're doing to each other and this planet. But in order to find out how this genetic experiment works, you've got to have some kind of remote information gathering, just as Bob said. And I think that this all dovetails for that particular reason.
Bob, as you look at this, and we've got about 35 seconds here left, I want you to give us your overview of what the heck is going on.
Well, I'm positive, 100% positive, we're being visited by extraterrestrials, and that some of them are putting implants in people. Now, I took a photograph of a flying saucer. That's what got me started in this. And the Byfield-Brown experiment, I know that proves anti-gravity. And John Hutchison's work proves it, and the Russians prove it. If scientists want to visit my website and get clued in, there's a scientific basis for this. Don't believe it, this idea that UFOs are nonsense. It's not true. We really got to get moving. This affects our economy. If we get free energy and anti-gravity, space travel changes, everything changes.
Oh, it all changes. Bob, thank you so much. And up next, joining us will be chemist Steve Colburn. Wait till you hear what he has to say. He's a chemist material scientist with 20 years of industrial experience, and he's currently working in the area of carbon nanotubes. Steve has recently done analysis on several apparent alien implants that Dr. Lear has removed from his patients and has uncovered startling findings as well. Now, Roger, tell me of Dr. Colburn's involvement, Steve's involvement.
Well, Steve became involved around the time of the 14th surgery, and they became very interested in the work, and when the 15th surgery was done, he had the ability to perform some of the very expensive analysis that we needed done. It was just a coincidence, and this is the way things happen even in science, that his field of expertise was in nanotechnology. And most people will maybe remember the story about carbon nanotubes. It was only about maybe 10 years ago where science was arguing whether carbon nanotubes could even exist, more or less exist in nature, and then finally they were constructed. And the carbon nanotube is very simply described as a structure of carbon in which the atoms are lined up in a particular form so that it adds tremendous strength. And there's been talk about, you probably heard it, about building a space elevator where you could launch a vehicle, but the tower would be so tall you wouldn't have to defeat the force of gravity, so which would be cost-saving advice for a conventional ship going to somewhere else in the solar system. The other thing they could be used for, Japan was interested in making clothing out of them, weaving them into fiber and cloth, and a woman could change the color of her dress or keep the individual warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So they have tremendous applications. They're the strongest known thing known to man. And Steve just happened to be in that particular area of expertise. And when he looked with his equipment, this was the first time, at some of the implants that we had already done, he found these carbon nanostructures, plus many other different things, which we're going to hear about.
All right, let's bring Steve in right now. Steve, tell me about your relationship here with Roger and what you uncovered and what your theories and conclusions might be.
Well, I've gone over, George, it's great to be here, first of all. And
thank you.
I've gone over several of Roger's objects that he's removed previously, like you said, plus I've analyzed extensively the last two objects from surgeries number 15 and 16, and we found some very startling things. We found nerve cells connected to the devices, as Roger's found in the past, and we found that the objects have a coating on them similar to a biological hard part like shell or bone, and that might be partly responsible for the lack of an immune response that we see to these objects in the body. Mm-hmm. These objects produce no immune response whatsoever, and that's extremely unusual. And
so you mean the body normally, when an object's in there like a sliver or something, the body attacks it, tries to get rid of it, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And in this case, it's not. It just kind of like welcomes it.
No, it does not try to get rid of the object at all.
At all, yeah.
These apparently are devices that are designed to not produce any sort of an immune response. And
Are you picking up, Steve, from these objects any kind of signals or any kind of field or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Like Roger said, we picked up radio signals from the devices, both the John Smith object from surgery number 15 and the Ron Noel object from surgery number 16 were giving off radio signals before removal. They were giving off different radio signals. Two of them from the John Smith implant turned out to be satellite and aeronautical communication frequencies. And both these objects also had strong magnetic fields of over 10 milligauss.
How were the objects detected?
How many objects have we detected?
Well, how do you find them?
You can pick them up on X-ray, or with a stud finder also works, a small metal detector, and a Gauss meter can also pick them up because they almost always have magnetic fields.
Do the objects look organic, or are they all artificial? What the heck are they?
Well, they seem to be a combination of both. The main bodies of the devices are metallic. They're mostly composed of iron, at least in all the objects that I've analyzed so far. The John Smith object was definitely meteoric iron. The trace element pattern matched exactly that of a class of nickel-iron meteorites called hexahedrites. But the material was apparently not from our solar system because, like Bob pointed out, the isotopic ratios were quite skewed compared to what is found on Earth or in our solar neighborhood.
Could we duplicate this implant today, Steve, if we gave it to a scientist?
I would have to say no to that. I think that even the Block Project military community would have either could not duplicate it or would have major problems even attempting to duplicate something like this. They are sophisticated nanotechnological devices with carbon nanotube electronics built right in, and they have a sophisticated organic coating, which is similar to a biological hard part, and do not produce any immune response to the body. And apparently nerve cells grow into the devices after they're implanted, and that's something that's beyond our technology as well.
Explain, if you would, for Steve, the carbon nanotubes, what exactly they are.
Well, carbon nanotubes are very tiny cylinders of carbon. They're similar to graphite. If you took a plane of graphite, a two-dimensional sheet of carbon atoms that's arranged in a hexagonal pattern like chicken wire, and you rolled it up into a tube, you'd have a carbon nanotube. There's various types of carbon nanotubes: single wall, double wall, multi-wall. You have nested tubes in the double wall and multi-wall, and these seem to be the single wall variety.
Are we using nanotubes now in any kind of application?
Yes, we are. The research is mostly in its infancy, but we've been trying to make ultra-strong metal matrix composites using carbon nanotubes. They're the world's strongest known material, plus they have very unique electronic and conductive properties.
How advanced would these nanotubes be that have been discovered in these folks compared to what we've got on this planet today?
Extremely advanced. These seem to be finished devices that are at least 100 years ahead of anything we can do at this point.
Minimum, I would guess.
Minimum, yes. That's being conservative.
Roger, when you looked at these objects, and you've been doing this for years, are you seeing a change, a technological change with these objects?
I would have to say no. I think the one thing that has changed is our abilities as we gain more knowledge and the sophistication of the equipment for which we were able to use to look at the objects. Now, why would anyone want to look at the carbon nanotubes 10 years ago when they said they couldn't exist? You know, and did we have anything? Did we have electron microscopes that would give us the necessary information? 10, 20 years ago. So as the devices advance, as our knowledge advances, you begin to look at things that you never looked at before. Now there are other things in these devices that Steve hasn't mentioned yet. I want him to address the issue. We find that there are crystalline structures, and I think this is something for him to explain.
Yes,
what are they?
Very
Go ahead,
interesting.
Steve. Go ahead.
Yeah, there were structures in the John Smith device in particular, such as orthorhombic crystals of sodium chloride. Sodium chloride usually has cubic crystals. These were elongated cubic crystals.
What's the significance of that, Steve?
Well, we're not sure, but they definitely were too regular to have been formed there when the blood serum evaporated, and they appear to have been part of the device. We hypothesized that they were there to generate certain scalar radio frequencies, similar to the old crystal radio sets.
Huh. How do you think these devices are put in a person?
Well, abductee reports indicate that the aliens have a device that has a long tube on it and a needle and a fiber optic going down the center, and that the device has a handle with a trigger, and the needle is inserted into the area of the body that they want to put the implant in, and a button is pushed, and the implant is then inserted through the needle into the body, and they're activated by ultraviolet light, according to many abductee reports.
Roger, when producer Tom Danheiser and I witnessed your surgical procedure to remove an implant out of the physical face cheek of a person, that thing moved. Every time the surgeon tried to grab it with his tweezers, the object moved. You finally got it out. But is that unusual, the movement of these things when you try to get it?
Now I would have to say no, because even in the 15th and 16th cases that we did, if you were looking at the X-ray scanning device, which we call a C-arm, and a metallic instrument is put into the wound, the object that you're trying to isolate or clamp moves, and surgical instruments are surgical steel, and they're not supposed to be interacting with any kind of a magnetic field. If so, it could be extremely dangerous in the case of, major surgery. So when you take a relatively inert stainless steel instrument and you insert it into a wound and it gets close to the object and the object moves out of the way, something other than what's usual is going on.
Steve, is it possible these objects are man-made?
I would have to say that it's maybe possible, but extremely unlikely because of the fact that the objects have very skewed isotopic ratios, and the material does not seem to come from our solar system. Plus the fact that it's highly doubtful that anybody on this planet has the technology to make such things. So it's a remote possibility, but I would say no.
Based on what you've analyzed, what do you think they are?
I think they're extremely sophisticated nanotechnological electronic devices that, like Bob said, are probably for the gathering and transmission of information. I think that they probably transmit sensory information, cite what the subject is seeing and hearing, and probably physiological information and the sounds in the room. They may be microphones, and
in terms of advanced, years ahead of us? You said 100, maybe more?
Yeah, I think 100 is a conservative estimate, maybe several hundred.
And that estimate is based on you guessing when we would have that technology, I assume,
correct?
Right? So it could be thousands of years ahead of us.
Yeah, it could be. It's very difficult to make these kind of technological predictions.
Probably a good time to interject a little sentence here that's in Dr. Kuntz's report, in which he said then the object could have come from a stellar system which began to evolve approximately 100 million years in advance of our solar system.
And that's all possible, too. Very possible.
Yes, I think it's possible.
And if you look at the things that Michio Kaku has talked about with the classes of his classification of civilizations, this falls right in line with a very advanced civilization.
It sure did. Steve, when you did your analysis, after you were done, were you in shock?
Yeah, pretty much. I pretty much came to the same conclusion that Dr. Kuntz did. That my first thought, seeing the isotopic analysis, was that these objects must have come from someplace closer to the galactic core, where heavier isotopes are built up because of higher mass supernovas. And I don't know how many astronomers are in the audience, but in any case, it did seem like from the data that the material came from someplace else in the galaxy.
Roger, how long have these implants been in the individual? Since they were kids or adults? When do you think?
Well, we had one known case which we could answer that very clearly, and that was 46 years. Now, in the last case, a very interesting case as far as an abduction scenario is concerned, there were 3 young boys, 9 to 10 years of age, and lived in Tennessee on a camping trip. And they all had conscious memories of something happening one night. And under hypnosis, the surgical subject related a pretty good scenario, which was certainly typical of the abduction phenomena. But what I found interesting also, in the time between, he's I think about 46 years of age now. So, 10, that was about 36 years. So, but interestingly enough, to hear under hypnosis, to hear him talking about the light from the craft overhead coming down, how they began to float. I'm an old buck, and if I was a kid, I would have a different attitude. Now, if someone or something lifted me off the ground, I'd be worrying about falling and breaking something. But to hear him explain this, as a 9 or 10-year-old boy, they were thrilled. Oh boy, I'm having fun. We're having a ball. We're floating up off the ground. See, no fear whatsoever. So,
Roger, well, based on what you see, based on what you've heard, based on what you've looked at, if you were putting implants in another civilization from another planet, why would you be doing it?
Well, the one thing, as I said, that's a very difficult question to answer, but you have to look a bit in totality at the whole UFO subject. Number one, I don't think that's much of a stretch now. What we know from governments and military sources and all the rest of the stuff, that there are visitors visiting here from somewhere else with advanced technology. I mean, that's a given. I have no question.
Yeah, the evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah, and if you accept that, then you got to go to the next step. There may be certainly remote-controlled vehicles, but again, from all the witnesses all over the world, this is not a U.S. phenomenon; it's a world phenomenon. The drivers of these things have been seen, and they've been seen in different forms and different garbs and guises and so on. So you have to have folks that are manipulating these vehicles, and in order to get there from here, the old story about they can't get here because of the distances of linear space.
People are thinking about it in our the propulsion systems. Of course not, but that's not how they're using their way to get here.
Of course not. And as Bob alluded to, that science is in a box, and we've got to think out of the box. So if they're coming here, they're doing abductions, they've got to be doing it for some reason. But then again, as I say, when you look at the possible effect of abductions, and you look at families and so on, I've been in 42 countries in 7 years. I've discussed this with parents and grandparents from literally all over the world. And if they talk about the kids, I'm talking about measurable, quantitative things that growing children do. What age do they raise their head, stand up, simple age of speech, complex speech, all been accelerated, 16 to 86%.
Steve Colburn is a chemist, material scientist with 20-plus years' experience in chemistry and nanotechnology. He's currently working in the area of carbon and nanotubes with his company, Neutron Star Nanotechnology. Steve has analyzed several alleged alien implants in recent years. His research discovered that these objects contain carbon nanotubes and other nanostructures, indicating that they are sophisticated nano devices made by a level of nanotechnology far beyond that of current mainstream earthly science. Steve was the first researcher outside of the government to make this discovery. And welcome to Coast, Steve. Good to have you with us again. I think you were with me about 8 years ago, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I was on with Dr. Lear, and we had Dr. Kuntz on, too, at that point to talk about the research.
You were pretty close with Roger, weren't you?
Yeah, I was his partner for, from 2008 to about 6 years, 2008 to 2014 when he passed away.
What a loss. What a loss,
yeah.
Steve.
Yeah, it's certainly not as fun to go to conventions, and the whole field is poorer without him, for sure. He was one of the most knowledgeable individuals in this field I've ever seen.
Wasn't he involved in some kind of car crash which may have contributed to his untimely death?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he was not in good health when I knew him. His circulatory system was shot. I'm not sure why. Maybe too much fried food or something earlier in life. But in any event, he was not in very good health. But he was, in well enough health. He was well enough to go to conventions and do the research and such. But he had a car crash about 2 years before he died that led to a downward spiral of his health, and he got shingles right after that, and then got a bad ulcer on his ankle that would not heal.
Jeez.
And he eventually ended up having to have vascular surgery to get it to heal, and he dodged a bullet on that one, and it did finally heal. But then only a few months after that, that injury finally healed up after he had the surgery and everything. He dropped a book on the ankle of the other leg, which led to another serious wound that would not heal and eventually got infected. And they were preparing to do vascular surgery on the other leg when he died of an apparent heart attack.
He was a great guy.
Yeah, he was.
We miss him a lot. How did you first meet him?
I first met Dr. Lear when I was working about maybe half a mile from his Camarillo office, and I had always been interested in UFOs and thought his research was fascinating. And then I knew that he worked only a few blocks away, and thought, it'd be fascinating to see some of those implants. And I never thought I would actually get to.
And he was a podiatrist by trade, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And my ex-wife and I had a lot of strange happenings, especially after we had children, that led me to believe that we were having some abduction activity. And I'd had missing time experiences before that I'd told her about before we got married, and she told me that she'd been scanned at night by what it was, I would think, probably a hologram. She said it looked like a large piece of metal up on end, like a piece of sheet metal that went slowly from head to toe on her, and it had colors coming out of it, and she said it looked real pretty. But she said that she started getting scared and tried to wake me up, and the second I started waking up, it turned into a red beam of light and shot out the window. And she also had red triangular marks on her abdomen and such during a couple of pregnancies. And anyway, we had all stuff like that happen. And then one night after the birth of our daughter in February of 2008, I was in the house alone. I had to water the plants and such, and it got late, and I got tired. And she was over at her mom's house, so I said I was going to just spend the night in the house alone. And I saw these two huge raccoons out in the yard, and one was about 70 pounds. I didn't even know they got that big, so I watched the animals for a while, and they seemed semi-tame, and I fed them some cat food and then went to bed. And I woke up in the morning about 8 o'clock, and felt kind of hungover, and had kind of a bruised feeling on the side of my head, and a stinging sensation in my toe, and there were 2 puncture wounds on the bottom of my toe, and each of them lit up bright green under ultraviolet light. And I didn't remember anything consciously at the time, although I remembered consciously some stuff about aliens before, but this time I did not remember anything consciously, but I just knew that they'd been there during the night and that I had 2 more implants. And so I thought, well, I've got to investigate this somehow. I mean, this is just something I can't ignore anymore. I was kind of in denial for a long time because I didn't have any real evidence, but I thought, well, this might be just the evidence that I would need to say one way or the other whether this is real or not. And so I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Lear a couple of weeks later, and just told him the first visit I just told him I had a foreign body in my toe, and he told me to come back and see if it would go away, and I came back the next week and told him it was about a possible alien abduction, and I don't think he believed me at first, but he told me to.
Was he into that at that time?
Yeah, he was into that. He started in 1994, before my time in the project. Daryl Sims was in with him at that time, and I guess they broke up around 2002 or thereabouts, and I came on board about 2008. And in any event, he gave me a prescription to get the toe X-rayed, and said to give a copy of the film to the patient, and I knew that I just knew, had a gut feeling I was going to see something on the X-ray film, but when they gave me that film and I looked at it and I saw something, that changed my life forever. I mean, it's one thing, it's quite different to strongly suspect that you're being abducted by aliens. It's quite another matter to know for sure.
What did this implant look like?
It looked like a bent piece of wire on the X-ray, and it looked smaller on the X-ray than it turned out to be in reality, surprisingly enough. And there's a picture of it. There's an X-ray picture of it on that paper I sent you, and in the paper where it talks about the John Smith implant. I referred to myself for a while as John Smith about this because I did not want to, go public about it immediately.
Right. No, I understand.
I must have analyzed it rather than an abductee as well.
Now, when I met Dr. Lear, it was in 2003, and he was conducting a implant removal out of a woman who had some kind of object in her cheek. And, every time he got close to her mouth and the cheek, it would move. He had a heck of a time getting it pulled out. But he finally did.
I heard part of that show. That was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I was just interested in everything he did after that. Now, in your particular case, was he ever able to analyze what they were?
Yeah, we did an extensive analysis on my implant and the Ron Noel implant. That was the patient number 16 implant that came right after me. I was patient number 15. But yeah, there's several types of implants, but the most common type is a metal core with a surface of what seems to be like a mother of pearl or a bone or a biological hard part over that. And there's probably enzymes in that this is speculation at this point, but there's most likely enzymes in that lead to the blood plasma or plasmas in the proteins rather in the host body turning into a black electrically conductive membrane that goes around the object. And nerve cells grow into that. There must be chemical cues in it for nerve cells to grow in it, nerve growth factor and such. And in any event, proprioceptor nerves grow into that membrane. And on some of them, the membrane is substituted by a layer of epithelial tissue that's not supposed to be there. It's very out of sorts for proprioceptor nerves to be in those areas of the body as well. They're usually used for the body sensing position.
Are these implants? Can they be altered? Can they be cut or anything like that? Yeah,
they differ a lot in hardness. Mine was actually quite brittle. they instead of trying to take it out in one piece, dissecting it out, Dr. Matriciano, who did most of the removal, tried to come in from the side of the toe and pull it out, and it broke into 12 pieces when he tried to remove it that way because it was brittle. And that turned out to be a good thing because it gave us a good look at the inside of the device. Dr. Lear gave me 2 pieces of it to analyze after the operation. And the Ron Noel implant, though, well, first of all, mine was brittle because it had relatively large micron-size carbon nanotube concentrations that acted as stress concentrations that made the metal brittle. The Ron Noel implant, on the other hand, had a higher concentration of carbon nanotubes, but they were well dispersed. And carbon nanotubes are the world's strongest known material, so Earthly Science is trying to use them to strengthen metal in current research, and the aliens have evidently perfected the process. And that metal was the strongest we'd ever seen. Diamond tools would not touch it.
Could you see the object with the naked eye, or did you need like a microscope?
We could see with the naked eye. The object was about 4 millimeters long by a little less than 1 millimeter in diameter, mine. And the Ron Noel implant looked like more like a seed. It was kind of
grain of rice,
triangular.
that kind of size.
What's that?
Like a grain of rice.
Yeah, like a small grain of rice, perhaps. And the Ron Noel implant was about the same volume, but it was more triangular. It looked kind of like the Star Trek communication badges in shape, sort of like that. And it was extremely, extremely strong. If you could build a submarine hull or something out of that material, it wouldn't need to be very thick for sure to go quite to the bottom of the ocean. That would be worth a lot of money if we could produce a material like that ourselves.
Have you come up with a theory, Steve, of what the devices are generally? Are they tracking devices in people? What are they?
Well, I think it goes without saying that they all can be used for tracking, but I don't think that's the primary purpose of a lot of them. I think that the one they put in my toe was a physiological monitoring device of some kind, probably to monitor things like blood sugar and temperature and how far the subject walks, blood pressure, stuff like that. And Dr. Kuntz, who was our partner for a while, thought that the characteristics of the device were such that it could be used as a room bug as well to directly transmit or transceive and transmit airborne sounds.
Could they make you do something almost like a Manchurian Candidate? Could they, change your thought patterns or anything like that?
I have reason to believe that they can. Yeah, I've talked to in the course of my research on alien abduction. I've talked to several hundred experiencers, and many have reported doing things that were out of character, and looking back on it, thought that probably the aliens were involved. There's no way to prove it for sure, but there's very good reason to believe that they can implant thoughts into people with these implants. And a lot of people have brain implants too. Like standard procedure seems to be for the Greys to put an implant into the brain of people that they plan to take a lot, like the one Whitley Strieber described in the book Communion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it goes up the nose. And somebody actually sent me one of those that was said to be sneezed out of someone before it could implant. And I remember the aliens telling me, I just remember spontaneously them telling me that they were made of a conductive polymer. And it was very interesting that when I analyzed that particular implant that this person sent me, another scientist sent me, it was made of a conductive polymer. And what I think they've told me, and leads me to believe that the implant uses proteins found in the brain and the blood plasma to build more conductive polymer and build like conductive polymer wires to various parts of the brain, I think they can utilize. They can do partial control, but not full control, and they can also access the subject's sensory information, see through your eyes, hear through your ears, stuff like that.
Well, when you said some partial control, I mean, could these implants indeed make somebody do something they didn't want to do?
I think so. What I've noticed in my own experiences is that sometimes they can make you have an obsession to do something, and it's especially dangerous and hard to fight because the subject almost always thinks it's their idea unless they've had extensive experience with it and know what to look for.
How do you find the implants in a human body? Because they're so small.
Well, I'm using Dr. Lear's techniques that he taught me. One of the most useful techniques is to just simply go over the subject with a stud finder, which is a small metal detector used to detect nails and walls.
And that'll register it, huh?
Yeah, it registers them quite nicely. And another really good technique is to use a Gauss meter, which detects very faint magnetic fields to go over the body, because these implants almost always have a strong magnetic field for their size, usually about 10 milligauss.
Stephen, who's doing this?
Well, I remember under hypnosis, I got hypnotized many times by Yvonne Smith and a couple other people, and regressed. And I remember Gray's doing it. I guess we can't totally rule out that the government's doing it. In fact, I've been hearing that the government has this technology as well these days. I know they've been working on their own implants for a long time. That's beyond doubt. But from what I've seen, or from what I saw as of when Dr. Lear died, the government implants seem to be a lot bigger. They're like chips, like regular computer chips. But these alien implants are much smaller and much more sophisticated with carbon nanotube electronics in them. Yeah, I haven't mentioned yet that I think the carbon nanotubes are actually the electronics of the device embedded in the metal.
And tell us a little bit more about carbon nanotubes.
Well, carbon nanotubes were discovered around 1991, and they're an allotropic form of carbon that's a lot like graphite is the most stable form of carbon. It's got layers of flat planes of carbon where the carbon atoms are arranged in like a chicken wire hexagonal pattern, and there's pi bonds, sigma bonds, and pi bonds bonding the carbons together, and it's quite stable. And the sheets stick together by van der Waals forces quite strongly. But if you took one of those sheets and peeled it off from the stack, and then rolled it into a tube, that would be a carbon nanotube.
Are they small?
Yeah, they can be various sizes. They can be very small. The single-wall carbon nanotubes are typically very small, around 1 nanometer in diameter. It's about 10 atoms across, and they can be even smaller than that. And they're small enough where a force called the Casimir effect comes into effect. It's a quantum force that's caused similar to gravity, that's caused by by differences in the density of the zero-point energy.
Steve, how does somebody know that they have an implant in them?
Well, the best way to know is to take the alien abduction quiz to see if you have the indications of being abducted. Most people that have been abducted extensively have implants, I would say. That's what I've been seeing so far in the course of my research. And it's things like having phobias, PTSD, having fear of insects, clowns. There's a lot of things. There's like a 50-question questionnaire that I give people that
I don't like clowns myself.
Really?
Yeah.
That's definitely an indication that by itself does not mean that you've been abducted, but there's like maybe 20 questions that are the most important among the 50 that if you answer yes to at least 10 of those, then you're probably an abductee.
Really? Do you have those questions close by? Can we go through them? Or maybe get them at the top of the hour?
Bring it up. Let's see.
Or you can get them at the top of the hour. Would we?
All right, top of the hour then.
We'll do that.
But I'll bring that up. But Yeah, I got the questions partly from Dr. Lear and partly from other people's questionnaires, and it seems to be a pretty reliable indicator. And usually, people that have had a lot of abduction activity or possible abduction activity have feelings about areas of the body that might be problematic, and you concentrate on those areas with the Gauss meter and the stud finder, and if there's something there, you can usually find it. And once you find something on the Gauss meter and the stud finder, especially if you have a stud finder hit and a Gauss meter hit that coincide, then that's got a high probability of being an implant. And then I tell them to go get it X-rayed.
Whitley Strieber has an implant by his cheek, by his ear, and he can't get it out. It just keeps moving. And
yeah, I heard about that.
So he's going to keep it in.
Yeah, he finally decided to keep it in. He decided at the last minute to keep it in.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lear had to find another patient, and the patient that he substituted for Whitley was my current girlfriend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's got an implant too?
She had one in her thigh. She had it removed. It
Jeez.
was a very unusual non-metallic one. That the only one we've seen one of those type, and she had that. It was a kind of a ceramic fiber type of thing.
Have these implants changed over the years?
It's really impossible to answer that question because we only have 17 examples that have taken over a less than 20-year period. But I would say no. I think that this is very old technology for them. If they've changed over the years, I think they've only changed in programming and not much in actual substance.
It's an amazing phenomenon. Now, what does science say about it? You can't refute the fact that somebody's got something embedded in their body.
No, and these things, the metal of these things has meteoric iron in it. I mean, that's prima facie evidence right there that it came from off planet. And we have some preliminary evidence, isotopic evidence, that indicates that these things may even come from beyond our solar system. I have to get more data to show that for sure, but the isotopic data that we got on the Ron Noel implant after the original analysis indicated that the nickel and copper in it probably came from off planet. So
are you working with any surgeons for removals since Dr. Lear has left us?
No, I don't have funding or an interested physician at this point, but I'm hoping to get both in the near future.
Are there any physicians out there who agree with you and others that this is something very strange?
Oh, yeah, I would say so. There's a lot of people that are interested in this phenomenon but don't want to come forward about it. People are understandably reluctant to talk about this. It's pretty scary stuff when you think about it. They're coming into our bedrooms at night and putting things in our bodies and taking us up to craft and doing examinations and a bunch of other stuff that's against people's will. And I don't know if they mean any harm by it, but it's pretty scary nonetheless.
Steve, just a guess, but roughly how many people do you think have been implanted? Hundreds, thousands, millions? How many?
At least thousands, tens of thousands, between tens of thousands and millions in this country alone.
Jeez. Now, when some people say they hear voices, could they be these implants? Could they be transmitting things to people?
Absolutely. Both my ex-wife and I at one point heard this weird series of sounds over a period of days that sounded like somebody had left a microphone on inside the UFO, and I was hearing all these noises, people walking around and aliens talking in their language and stuff like that. And finally, she confirmed that she heard it too. After a sound that sounded like somebody dropping a big tray of tools. And that's when we started talking about a lot of these strange events that have been going on.
Was Dr. Lear's death strange? Anything unusual to it?
He told me that right before that crash that started the downward spiral to his death, of his health that led to his death, he heard a bang under his head, and he didn't make a big deal out of it, but I'm not a big believer in those kind of events and coincidences, so it's possible somebody did something to this car. I just don't know.
Could he have been an abductee, too?
I think he was. In his books, he said that he had some strange experiences that sounded like abductions. He didn't like to talk about it, but he thought it might hurt his credibility. But
are there similarities, Steve, between people who have had implants?
Absolutely. The aliens seem to be, it's a lineage thing, and the aliens seem to be looking for people with Germanic, Celtic, or Native American backgrounds. They seem to want people that are highly intelligent, psychic, have some scientific or technical talent, very creative, and they seem to want people that have a military background that might be able to fight a war for them at some point.
Is our government aware of this kind of technology?
Yes, I have reason to believe they are. I've heard that that some aliens that they're involved with. This is just hearsay at this point, but I've heard that reports that they've been given the actual alien implants at this point. But I know for sure they've been working on their own and have their own that were not nearly as effective, but that would do something.
What suggestions, Steve, would you give to people who think they have some kind of implant in their body?
Well, I would say don't stress too much about it, but they could make an appointment with me to be scanned. I do scanning of people, and
but you don't remove them.
No, I don't remove them.
You're not
I'm
a
hoping
surgeon.
to get funding and an interested physician to take up Dr. Lear's research again in full. But for right now, I can scan people using his techniques to get preliminary information about whether they've got an implant or not.
Okay. By scanning, do you get an idea of the size of the object?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, you can tell the difference between a government implant and an alien implant for sure, because the government implants are generally so much bigger, at least the older ones. They're just like the size of a computer chip, maybe half a centimeter on a side.
How deep are they embedded in the body?
Generally not very deep. Generally a centimeter or so, if I wanted to generalize. And they're usually in the extremities of the body, like the toes, the feet, the hands, the wrists, thighs, forearms, the brain, or either up the nose or in the ear. I've only seen one person with one in the thorax. There's none in the abdomen, but one guy has one in his thorax that a magnet will stick to. That was pretty trippy.
It's amazing technology that they've been using, and with the
a lot
carbon,
of them have really strong magnetic fields.
And carbon, they last long. It's strong material, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's darn near indestructible. I mean, you could heat it to 2,000 degrees Celsius in vacuum, and that won't hurt it. Even in an oxygen atmosphere, they'll survive temperatures up to like 500 degrees Celsius without any problem. And they're extremely strong and very durable. And there's types that are semiconducting and types that are metallic. So you could actually make electronic arrays with them embedded in the metal. And they're actually trying to do that with earthly research right now. And that would be a lot smaller and more efficient than the silicon-based electronics we have now.
If these are extraterrestrial implants, in your opinion, what do they want?
That's a very good question. I think that they're here to utilize the resources of the Earth-Moon system. There's a lot of resources, mineral resources on the Earth and the Moon that they want. and they want to harvest DNA and eggs and sperm and stuff from reproductive capability from people, and they want to create hybrids of themselves and humans, and I think their ultimate goal is to repopulate the Earth with hybrids and the strains of humans that they most desire to be here. And I think they're not going to kill us all off to do it. They're going to wait until we do something to ourselves.
Are they trying to help us, hurt us? What are they doing?
It depends on your point of view. I think they're trying to help us indirectly by making us more intelligent, less violent, more amenable to reason, stuff like that. But they're not trying to help the average guy on the street. They're not trying to help our society. They could care less about our society. They think it's primitive and stupid. Well,
in some cases, they're probably right, huh?
Yeah, I must say I agree with a lot of their statements that they've made, but
they don't seem to mind that the evidence of the implants are left behind. They do some self-destruct.
Yeah, in the early days, some self-destructed, but they seem to have stopped that. Dr. Lear put the implants in blood plasma from the patient to prevent any kind of self-destruction, but I saw no evidence that any kind of self-destruction was in evidence right now, but there were reports of it earlier on, so I have to think that perhaps they stopped that, if indeed that ever was the case. But right now they don't care. It's late in the game, and they want the message that they're here to get out to the people that are ready to hear the message, is my impression.
Is the activity increasing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's definitely increasing. I think that they fly thousands of sorties a day from motherships in orbit to abduct people, and I think it's definitely increasing, and it's leading up to some kind of an endgame scenario which will reduce the population of normal people on the Earth, and at that point they're going to introduce their hybrids and repopulate the Earth. And
so this is not a good thing.
I can't really say if it's a good thing. It may be a great thing. It just depends whether they just want to take over or if they're doing this for some cosmic purpose. But I think we are headed for disaster. I don't think that the civilization that we built is sustainable. I haven't thought that for a long time. What
did Roger Lear used to say about this, Steve? I mean, he's been on the program with us before, but in your opinion, because you were close to him, what did he say behind closed doors?
He used to kind of shy away from trying to predict what was going to happen, but I think he more or less agreed with me about that there would be some kind of end game scenario that would lead to a catastrophe where they would step in and repopulate the Earth with their own people. There are actually hybrids among us right now. I remembered under regression actually seeing hybrids in underground bases in California and Nevada. Being given cars and money and maps and told to go here and rent an apartment.
And they're doing it.
Yeah, I think they have at least several thousand hybrids in the United States right now living among us.
And are all these people in communication with each other or not?
Yes, I believe so. Directly or indirectly. I really don't know if it's direct, but I think it probably is.
Steve, give out your website or how people can get a hold of you.
Okay, my website is www.alienevidenceinc. That's alienevidenceinc.webs.com, and you can find the paper on the John Smith implant that came out of my toe on the website.
It's right there. And we've got the link for you set up at coasttocoastam.com, too. Okay, what we're going to do is come back with phone calls. And also, if you think you might have an implant, check in with us, and let's have Steve talk with you about that. Up next, the world's leading expert on alien abductions joins us. Daryl Sims, the alien hunter. Some great stories. Wait till you hear what Daryl has to say. His 38-plus years now of field research has focused on physical evidence, led to his groundbreaking discoveries of alien implants. As a former military police officer and CIA operative, Daryl has a unique insight to the alien organization, which he believes functions similarly to an intelligence agency. He is also a skilled therapist who has helped hundreds of alien experiencers all over the planet come to terms with what they have witnessed. A couple of his books include Alien Hunter, The Evidence and Truth About Alien Implants, and Alien Hunter, The Evidence in Light, and his video, Best Evidence, Profiling the Alien. Welcome to the program, Daryl. Good to have you back.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, George.
And I am so glad you are doing what you're doing. You know, when we lost Dr. Roger Leir, I thought, I knew you were into alien abductions in a big, big way, but you really have stepped up on the implants, too, now. You basically have replaced Dr. Leir.
Well, he was actually, Roger and I were partners at one point in this, and I brought the implant phenomena to him, and he wasn't really sure about all that at first. Alice Levy was his best friend, and she introduced me to him, and that's how I met Roger, and just entered the relationship from that point on.
I miss him, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
He was a good guy indeed. What have you been up to over the last couple of years since we last chatted?
Well, you know, last thing I remember about you, when I saw you was it's a birthday party at Contact in the Desert. And
yep.
I'll tell you, that was an ordeal. Oh, very good. They really treated you right.
I miss those live events, don't you?
I do. In fact, I'm going to one down in McCallum in Edinburgh, Texas this weekend. In fact, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll be leaving.
Well, good. Well, you be careful and enjoy yourself. And we're thinking of having a live program in Everett, Washington in September. We were going to do it last year, but of course COVID hit in a big way. But this too shall pass. I don't think it's going to be around forever.
You're right on target. Right on target about that.
Some of your latest work. Let's talk about what you've been studying and what you've been working on. What's breaking these days in your agenda?
Oh, this is really weird. Had a police officer contact me, and he's a police officer in a special way. He's a really good cop, and he's also in the medical field. And long story short is he sends me this object that he found embedded in his back, and he said, "I know you're the head implant guy and all that, but he said I can't figure out what this is." And he's had apparently these UFO events along with it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that interested me a great deal because of the background and the police officer and so on. And then he sent this to me, and then a few weeks later, he called me back and he said, I need to talk to you immediately. And I said, okay, what about? And he says, two FBI agents in two separate cars approached my house, and they wanted to know about my alien problem that I was having.
Jeez. How'd they even know about it?
Thank you. And he said, I was a little more than alarmed. And I said, what alien problem would that be? And he said they were choking and gasping, trying to get the word alien out. They finally said, the alien has been bothering you. And he said, I actually have had a problem like that. And they got loosened up a little bit and found they had established some rapport with this weird subject. And then they said, well, I'd like to know about the object that you found.
My gosh.
He said, I hadn't told anybody about it. How do they know this stuff? And then he said, they asked him if he still had the object. And he says, well, no. He said, I had it sent off to be studied. And both the officers looked at each other, and then looked at him and said, oh, you mean you sent it to Daryl Sims?
Oh. They've been listening in on this guy or something.
Yeah. He of course, the big question came to me, the reason he was concerned, he said, how do they know all about this stuff? And I said, well, I thought I'm not much of a conspiracy buff. And I said, but here it goes. I said, many years ago on Art Bell, back in the 1990s, I was talking to him for the first time and then the second time. And then I decided to have a little fun. Back then I had a cryptologist who was a webmaster, and he was sitting there listening that night, and I just decided to drop some old terms, intelligence terms, into the conversation without mentioning anything about intelligentsia, just to see who was listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, my cryptologist called the next morning, and he was screaming at me. I said, hey, don't talk trash like that to me. He said, what are you doing? He said, and I said, well, I just wanted to see who was listening. He said, well, they're all listening. I said, who? And he said, everybody. And he said, we got 250 hits last night. And I said, well, that's good. We got a lot of hits on the site. And he said, you don't understand. The whole alphabet intelligence agencies are listening. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, this is what I did when I was in the service as a cryptologist. He said, we got hit by 250 computers in the intelligence community last night.
Wow.
And I said, what? He said 3 of them were in the White House and they're NSA computers.
He could track that.
He's that good. Well, the reason that's kind of interesting to me, besides that, is later a woman approached me and 2 of my doctors out in California, back not long after that, and she's a real pretty lady. I'd never met her before, never seen her before, and I said, so why am I here? What's this about? And she said, well, I wanted to talk to you. She said, Hillary and Bill Clinton are my best friends. I later identified her as Uma Aberdeen. I believe that is her. She's a very, very pretty lady. And anyway, they said they were very interested in your work, and I said, okay. She said, would you like to have some money for your research? I said, well, certainly, because of what I do, but under these conditions, no. And she said, why not? And I said, let me explain something to you. I said, I'm a private investigator and was former military police officer. And if things ever happen in these type of situations, in other words, if that money is not exactly pure, so to speak, little people go to jail and big people get off. They get away.
That's right.
Every time. That's the name of the game. And I said, I'm not interested. Of course, the 2 doctors were horrified because there were several $1 million mentioned, and they were all thinking, $1 million for all 3 of us, $1 million for research. That's not what I had in mind. I had like $4 million for research, period. But anyway, so I'm not unaware that folks are listening. The important thing is I want to know specifically who, and I found out that day. But my cryptologist he was about ready to skin me alive. He was furious.
He didn't realize that, did he?
No, and if I told him, he'd have just said, you're a conspiracist.
Yeah.
You're trying to make yourself more important. And I got 600 phone calls and emails in the next few weeks from people on coast to coast. And here's one illustration, and this is not bragging. This is a hand to God true story. One guy called me and identified himself and his position, and I realized this guy is so far above my pay grade. I had a top secret clearance. It's reduced to a secret now.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy blew me out of the water. I mean, he was way above my pay grade. And he said, he was in tears. He said, I'm an abductee. I need help, and you could help me. You could do this. And I said, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody, and I want you to pay strict attention and do this immediately. He said, what's that? Get off the phone now. Get off while you can. You're in a great deal of trouble if you get caught. I said, they don't care about me. I am not the star of the of this show, so to speak. You are. And who's calling me is what they're listening to, not me, because I'm public. I put out almost everything I have. I make public.
You make public with it, sure.
I don't care. It's for humanity. It is. We don't charge anything for what we do. It's philanthropic work. I said, please get off the phone, sir. And he was in tears. He said, but I thought you were going to help me. I said, I would. I do all the time. But I can't in your case. I said, you're going to lose your career, and you may be in a lot more trouble than you can imagine. Please get off the phone right now. And he hung up. But there were several people that called like that. I went to the Native American conference in Dulce last year, 2 years ago. And a gentleman came up to me, and he was in tears. And he, again, pay grade, far above mine in the intelligence area. And he was in tears. He said, I am suicidal. He said, I've thought about ending my life several times. And he started telling me about some of his operations, what he did. And I said, please don't do that. I said, I'm telling you, I would never tell anybody anything. That's not the point. I'm totally trustworthy. I'll never betray the country, even in any sense of the word. I said, but that's not the point. I said, and I know you're hurting. I said, and I'm going to be back here soon. And when I do, I'll meet with you privately and personally, and I'll work with you. I swear it. And I said, but don't tell me all this other stuff. You don't. That's not necessary. I don't need to know any of it. Period.
This officer's implant that he took out, he handed it over to you. Did you get it analyzed? What was it? I
do have it, and since then there's been something else. So
oh boy,
it gets better. I just love this guy. We've become best friends. He's my family. All our lives have rescued animals, wild animals. We had a tiger, a Bengal tiger, a mountain lion, and 3 giant pythons at one time.
Jeez.
But we've done this all our lives and still rescue animals from time to time. My daughter now in Scotland has got she rescues birds, every kind of animal, bird you can imagine that gets hit by cars, runs into the side of trucks and things like that in Scotland. And she replaces beaks on animals, birds that fight each other and get them torn off, and does great stuff. The point is, he did the same thing. He is an animal guy, and he sent me pictures of his animals, and I just am amazed at some of the stuff. But to answer your question specifically, we have not had it analyzed. We have a lab that we use here in Houston, and we have 4 different objects besides his that we want to make comparisons on.
What's it look like, Daryl?
It is small and black. It appears to have broken into several pieces. I'm not sure why that is. It was embedded in the skin. It wasn't under the skin like many of these are. Many of them are subcutaneous. In rare cases, some of the implants are deep inside the body. Like the case I did in India, in New Delhi, India, several years ago. That lady had 3 implants, one that was very easy to see under her skin, above the clavicle, and then she had one deep in her leg, and then one very deep in her side. And the surgeon, who was never told anything, the surgeon who was there from India, he figured it out after a while. None of this is natural. He saw that for a while. And he says, Daryl, he said, what I'm looking at here on this X-ray, the one on the inside and her thigh, and especially the one in her side, he said, when you come back to New Delhi, please let me do the surgery on this. He said, I would love for you to assist me with it. Please let me do that. He said, I am so excited. He said, this stuff, I've never seen anything like it ever, anywhere. So in reference to his case, the police officer's case, we have not analyzed that yet because we're going to do our comparisons, and then we're going to take his to the lab separately, and they still don't know anything about any of this stuff, but I'm telling you, it doesn't take very long for them to get a very clear picture. None of this is natural, and we've never seen it before.
How did he extract it, Daryl? Did he do it to himself, or what happened?
He had some memory of UFO events, which is interesting to me for his case, and he found it embedded in his skin, in his back, and he finally pulled on it and played with it enough. He finally got it out and realized this doesn't. Like I said, he's in the medical field as well. He's got a strong background. So none of this made any sense to him. And he said, I looked you up, and he said, I'd heard about you. And he said, and strangely enough, most of these people hear from me on your program, as a matter of fact. I'll get probably 20 or 30 inquiries about implants just from your show alone.
After the show, sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You had a case where you got an implant from a deceased abductee. Tell me about that.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my.
I did. This is an implant that came to me, and the guy, first of all, the one that sent it to me, I'm not quite sure how he found out every detail about me, but he did his homework, and he's not in the UFO world. He's not a UFO guy at all. He said, but my father was. And he started talking about his father. I said, well, tell me about your father. Tell me about him. He said, well, of course, he's recently passed and all that. He said, the weird thing is, he said, he loved baseball more than anything in the world. I said, well, tell me. He said his favorite player was Lou Gehrig.
Huh.
And I said, that's interesting because my father died from Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, boy.
And my father loved baseball more than any human being I ever saw. We started comparing notes on our fathers, and it was just amazing. And anyway, he said, my father finally told me years ago, and told the family, made everybody know it, that he had an object placed in the back of his calf during his UFO events. And, of course, we all thought, right.
Yeah, right, Dad, right, that kind of thing.
So he said he passed away. And when he did, we called our friends who were doing not the autopsy, but preparing the body. And they said, hey, remember what Dad said? And he said, would you please look in his calf and see? And they found it, and they sent it to me.
Wow.
And I'm telling you that I've never seen anything like it.
Is that part of those that still need to be analyzed?
Oh, yes, that's number 5.
What do you think these implants are used for? Are they tracking devices?
No, sir, they're not. I'm happy to mention that. And thank you for asking that, because a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that's just not true. And one of them is that the implants are tracking devices. In fact, Stan Friedman, when he was alive, asked me the questions, because questions come up at our UFO meets, especially at Roswell, and we're on this big panel and everything, and everybody loves Stan. Everybody.
Oh my God, I miss him.
And yeah, and they would ask questions. Well, what about the implants for Stan? He said, well, I don't know anything about them. He said, maybe they're a tracking device or whatever. And he said, what do you think, Daryl? And I said, they're definitely not a tracking device.
So what could they be?
Well, it's be easier to define what they're not, and that'll help us focus that, I think, for your audience. They're not tracking devices. They're not a transponder. If they're tracking devices, how'd they find you to begin with? Obviously, they'd be much bigger than you were at conception, as an example.
Right.
So that's out. They're not They're not tracking. They're not a transponder. They're not for that, in my opinion, based on all my experiences since because my implantation actually occurred when I was 12 years old, and I was wide awake when it occurred. That's how I knew implantation existed. That's where I discovered it. Not because I was particularly brilliant or anything like that, but simply because I was there and wide awake when it happened. So they appear to be for different operations. One of the best ways to kind of find out about that is to find out where it's located. And many of these people, in fact, one of them, literally, this happened yesterday. A gentleman called me from Scotland, and his wife and him saw a UFO, and they were driving down the road, and he runs out, gets out of the car, and leaves her in the car, runs out there with his camera, and films this UFO up close. And he thinks, wow, this is really cool. You know, I'm doing great. And he doesn't really have a clue. And he said, since then, he said, I've got these horrible headaches, and he said, we took the film back home. He said, I drove at a great speed to get back home. We checked our camera, film, and everything in it, and he said, the film is blank from the point I start filming the UFO.
Huh.
And he said, so it's missing. I said, well, please don't erase anything. Send it to us. Let our tech people check it out. We might be able to do something.
Right. You might salvage it or something.
He said, well, something else has happened. He said, I went to the doctor because I got these horrible headaches and nosebleeds, and they put me in this round thing. I said, it's called an MRI tank, a chamber.
I hate those tubes, by the way, Daryl. I get claustrophobic in those things.
Oh, fortunately, they've got bigger and better ones now and more open. But anyway, he said they found a mass inside my nasal passage, a dark mass, and they can't figure out what it's doing in there. What is that? And I said, you might want to have that explored. And I said, I'll actually be in England doing some presentations on my European tour whenever they let up on the virus thing here soon enough. And Steve Mayer, I'll be doing a conference for him as well. And anyway, he said, I don't know what to do. He said, what? How did all this happen? And he doesn't understand. When you went out there looking for the UFO or before, one of the two, maybe even before, that's when you and your wife had missing time. I said, that's when the reason you don't have anything on your film is because you probably weren't really filming at that point. You think you were. That's your screen memory. That's the false memory syndrome.
Do you think, what's your gut tell you based on your experience with all these devices? What's your gut tell you they might be?
Well,
you sound a little baffled.
I am, because the answer, I wish it were simple. I truly do. An example, a lady contacted me. She is a pharmacologist, and she said, I want to talk to you about this implant stuff. This is really fascinating to me, and especially the alien thing. She says, Daryl, you realize you're going to find out they're learning things, or maybe already have learned things about them and what they're up to that we don't know. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, do you have any clues? And I said, well, yes. I said, some of the people that are abductees that have had these rare implants have found themselves with altered neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and so on. And she said, oh, my God, if that's true, Daryl, let me explain to you what that suggests. And she said, it scared her. She later quit.
It scared her?
Just walked away. She said, whoever controls your neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, but it doesn't matter. She said, I'm telling you, they own you. They decide whether you're happy, sad, glad, or whatever. And I said, well, I can contextualize that for you. There are abductees and contactees. These are contactees being described as those people who like the contact or feel it's for our best and ultimate good and so on, that the alien's here to save the planet, fix the ozone hole or whatever, which hadn't done in a few thousand years. Or the other people like me are abductees, which are not really happy that happened and that you basically kidnapped me to do it and so on, and our children if they came after them. And she said yes. And I said, well, I can assure you based on my own event that and many, I've got over 2,000 cases worldwide, many of these events have shown themselves to be levels of alien influence whereby they literally have gone beyond your wishes and ideas. And I could get real specific here. I'm not comfortable in doing it, but the research shows it. and people come back with phobias that they never had before, and they can't figure out where that's from. And of course, you do a little therapy work with them, you can find out pretty quickly where that comes from. So alterations of neurotransmitters is a big one. The fact that 45% of the people taken that we've studied since the 80s are Native American, Indian, Irish, and Celtic. Even it goes into the Basque community of northern Spain. But it's critical that there are two levels, abductees and contactees, because the contactees overall, and I'm not picking on anybody here at all, I would never do that.
No, I understand.
The contactees are more malleable. They're easy to manipulate for the alien. Absolutely easy.
Now, the location of the implants seem to be all over the body.
They are all over the body. In fact, originally, Roger wrote a book, and he said all these implants are on the left side of the body. And I said, Roger, you shouldn't say that. And he said, well, that's what you said. And I said, no. I said, only the ones that I've shown you are on the left side of the body. I didn't show you the ones on the right, nor did I show you the ones in the middle.
Or behind the leg and the calf and all that other stuff.
I said, you can start from the crown of the head and go all the way down. I said, the easiest way to think about this, and I think your audience will greatly appreciate this, and I'll say it for the first time. If you follow meridians on the body, you'll find out more about what the implant may be about.
This is weird stuff, though, isn't it, Daryl?
Yes, sir. It is.
My gosh.
Really, you don't have to make it up. You don't have to read into it. You don't have to go out and people do make up stuff. They'll hear this program tonight and go out and write 3 new books about it that are not going to be really accurate. The point is, I already wrote a book about it, and I didn't intend to, but people with implants wanted more information, so I did. But the point is that as we study this more and more, we're coming to some really great crescendos here in the research. Number one, they asked me here a while back, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? You could do anything you want. That's the first thing I'd do is grab a bunch of my abductees, pay for their flights to it, and I have the university picked out, and take people with implants there, and people who've had implants removed, and have them also meet with each other and see what the results are going to be amazing. I can tell you right now. And I said, this next thing, I want all the objects that have been removed that I still have, I want them tested, see if we can basically ping them and see if there's any signal or anything that'll turn them on, so to speak. And another third thing I want to do is when we ping them, I want to see if the people in the other room notice anything, the ones that have still got them in situ, in their own body at the time. And another thing I want to do is to reinstall some of these implants back into animals and see if we can follow them and monitor them and see if they'll come back to retrieve them. So there's a lot of fun stuff that we're just waiting to happen. It just takes money to do this.
I also understand you have something very strange in your freezer.
Yes, sir, we do. As a matter of fact, fortunately, it's not in our regular freezer. It's the one I have special for UFO work. But what I have in the freezer there is, it's called a Texas chupacabra.
A chupacabra.
And for the audience to take the sensationalism off of it, it's also called the Texas blue dog.
Does it look like a dog?
It kind of. I was at my friend's home in Austin, and he's a hunter, and he literally hunts for the government. I mean, he hunts coyotes and things like this, and you have to keep certain populations down because to help the deer population.
Yeah, so sadly, but you have to do that.
In balance, so that they'll all be successful. Anyway, he is listening to me talk about this. His wife helps me at Roswell every year, and she's sitting there. She big cat eating grin on her face, and she said, "You just stepped in it." He said, well, it's a coyote, is what it is. And I said, no, it's not. And he said, yes, it is. And I said, well, sir, no, it's not. And he said, Daryl, this is what I do for a living. I said, you don't hunt the Texas chupacabra, the Texas blue dog. He said, it's because it's a coyote, or it's a hybrid. That's all it is.
Or a mutant or something like that.
Thank you. So I pulled out the photographs. And he says, oh, my God, look at the teeth on that thing. What is this? And I said, I told you. And she looked at me and just grinned, says, just like everybody else. They think they already know. I said, the young lady, I said, the greatest enemy of truth is the following thing, that you think you already know what it is.
Yep.
Wow.
That's cool. And there's a picture of this on your website, isn't there?
I have not put it on the website yet. Interestingly enough, the guy said, I'll pay to have that thing stuffed for you. And I said, well, it's a little ripe right now. But I said, I do want it stuffed and mounted, but he wanted to keep it. And I said, that's not going to happen. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it as a philanthropic effort like me. I said, but there are reasons for it. I said, anyway, a lady from North Texas called shortly thereafter, a few days ago, as a matter of fact, a few weeks, really. And she said, there's a strange thing that's been following me. I've got UFO events, but something's been following me. And I checked her out, and she's the same as anybody in the world. So it's a nice big ranch and everything. It's a dog-like creature. But she said, Daryl, I'm going to sound crazy here. She said, just talk to me. Tell me what you saw. It's blue. It has almost no hair. And I said, the hind legs are longer than the forelegs, and it almost runs like.
How big is it, Daryl?
It's not large. It's I would say
smaller than like a Labrador.
Yeah, a little smaller and thinner. And the amazing story I told this hunter about this particular one, I said, why did you shoot him? And he said, well, it was in my barn and everything. I said, well, sir, I appreciate that, but I would have rather you'd called me and let me trap it. I'd rather not kill him. And he said, well, it was in my barn. And I said, you've got a lot of horses here. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, he said, what do you think this thing is? He said, well, it's got to be a coyote or something. And I said, but that's not a coyote. And I looked in the sack. He had it frozen off for me. And I said, that's not a coyote, sir. And he said, well, it's a hybrid. And I said, it could be. I don't know. We're going to do DNA testing on it at some point, and we'll find out. We'll have a university do it. And he says, the weird thing is, the horses loved it.
They loved it? They got along with it?
Yeah. Horses and coyotes don't mix. Coyotes tend to eat things like horses and things.
Yeah, they do.
Yep. This thing ate 16 cats at the ranch on the other 100 acres over from me. He said it ate all 16 of their cats. That's what they use to keep the rats down. And he said, but it lives there in the barn, and I've got pictures of it. It lives in the barn with the horses. And when I was carrying the sack out of the frozen Texas blue dog, one of his horses is on film, comes over to me and starts sniffing in the sack for his little buddy. This is weird. And a cop, is a Houston cop, went with me and filmed the whole thing. So I wanted it all filmed just for the heck of it. So at some point we will put it up and all that for sure.
Interesting, Dad. And you said when you were 12 you had a implant. Was that your first alien experience?
No, sir, it wasn't. My first experience with the alien, and very briefly, was simply approximately 4.5 years old, and literally I woke up is not the right word. It was like I was switched on, like somebody flipped a switch and they shouldn't have, and I opened my eyes. I'm sitting up in bed like, what? And there's this little skinny guy walking away from me toward the wall. And I'm thinking he's going to bump into the wall. I didn't know that he had just brought me back, and we both came through it. So this was, I said to myself, who is it? Where's his clothes? It's winter, it's cold. It's freezing. And as soon as I thought that in my head, he turned around, and that was a real shock because he's got large, big black eyes, skinny little body, and his eyes are perfectly round.
Mm-hmm.
This was 1952 when I was about 4 years old.
And you remember this? My gosh.
Absolutely. My mother said, "Son, you couldn't remember that because you were too young." I said, "Mom, we lived at 1005 South K Street, Midland, Texas. Do you want to know the phone number?" "How can you remember that?" I said, "Well, I'm not stupid, Mom. I have a memory. I can remember things. I have a decent memory." And so, anyways, the thing that amazed me was the entity apparently heard me thinking this stuff. We're hooked up somehow.
Daryl, I'll let you finish up the story when you were 4 years old and had that ET experience.
Yes, the entity was. He turned around after I wondered why he was going to walk into the wall, and he apparently heard me. When he turned around, I saw him, and I was stunned, and I noticed several things. Number one was that he didn't have any clothes on at all, and it's cold. It's wintertime. I thought, how could you're freezing out there. And the second thing I noticed, and kids notice things adults don't notice at all, not only not having any clothes on, he didn't have a TT. He didn't have a belly button. I mean, kids would notice that. He didn't have a belly button. I have one. Where's his? And I'm really confused by this whole thing. And the next thing that stunned me more than anything in the world is I heard him talking in my head, and he said, "It's awake." And at that point, I was in for a real surprise. But the bottom line is, since then, I've learned a great deal about the alien. And for your audience, simply put, if you don't have genitalia or a navel, you weren't born. You didn't get here the way we did. You were either hatched, cloned, made, or manufactured, and for a particular purpose. And I suspect we're part of that program. And the fact is that the abductions are only about 150, 200 years old, maybe even less than that. The contact experience, so to speak. The aliens have been around for 1,000 years. That's absolutely true. You can see it on petroglyphs all over the world, and I have.
Do you think, Daryl, that people are being abducted and not being brought back?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yes. And we have evidence of some people that were abducted and brought back and were in a far worse state than they were when they left.
What do you think the agenda is, Daryl?
I wish I totally knew. If I knew everything, I could tell you everything. I can only surmise. What I believe isn't nearly as important as what I can prove or have evidence of. So as a cop, I take that stance pretty much. And the evidence is showing that manipulation is at least happening to a lot of it. And two, that in cases of extreme contact, it's not going to go well for people or animals.
Not at all.
Yes, sir.
Not at all. Now, these cases, these abduction cases where people are brought back, generally, like Travis Walton in those cases, it's what, a couple hours?
Yes. And normally an hour and a half to 2 to 3 hours is the maximum. In rare cases, like Travis asked me, he said, "How is it that they said I felt like I was only gone for like 20 minutes, and they said I was gone for several days? How can that be?" And I said, "Well, Travis, if you use a physics hat here, it might provide an answer." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "If you're traveling at a relativistic speed, you may have actually been gone for 4 or 5 days from our point of view. You may have only been gone 20 minutes from your point of view." Einstein says both views are correct.
You checked your statistics, and you say that about 45% of the people taken as abductees or contactees are Native American, Irish, or Celtic. Tell me about that.
Very good. When I first made this really a big public story, was in Istanbul, Turkey, almost 20 years ago. And I've been back since, so go back to Tapley and so on.
Yeah.
But the big thing was when I told the Turks this, they said, "We love your presentation. Everything you said, wonderful, except you have one one big flaw in your story, and that's what's that. He said, we're Turks, we're not Indians. And I laughed and I said, my stats are correct, sir. And he said, and they said, no, but we're Turks. I said, you're not listening to me. I said, 55% of people taken are not Native American, Indian, Irish, Celtic, etc.
That's right. That's right.
And I said, but you're missing the point. I said, your people originally lived in teepees, not just tents, not Arabic tents, but teepees, very similar to Native Americans. And they laughed and was like, well, we never heard of that. And I said, okay. A professor in Ankara, the capital of Turkey, did a DNA study on certain Native American tribes in the north, took the DNA back, and tested a lot of the Turk populations and found they are related to Native Americans. And they had the biggest powwow you ever saw in Turkey over that.
And this is a worldwide. This is worldwide too, though, isn't it, Daryl?
It is. It is worldwide. I've got cases in India, Japan. It makes no difference. Slovakia. It makes no difference whatsoever. The cases are still real. They're still the same.
Now, why would the statistics show that most are Native American, Irish, Celtic, 45%? That's a lot for just,
in my
three
opinion,
groupings.
The manipulation is the name of the game with contact. That's just it. And I don't care whether you're in the program that is called benevolent. It makes no difference. It's still about manipulation. You're getting what you're going to get the dose, whether you like it or not, so to speak. And I think that, and some people tell me, well, they're upgrading our DNA. I don't know that to be true at all, but let's suppose it is. I said, if that is true, or some semblance of that is true, I said, there are a lot of us that are being taken, like me, who are abductees. In other words, we don't like it. We're not going to go along with it. It's never going to happen. If that is the case, they're upgrading the DNA of the contactees, so to speak. What do you think they're doing for us that don't comply?
That's exactly
I
right.
said, I can assure you, in my own personal experience, I know something about that. And it's not positive.
Interesting take on all of this. Since you've been doing this all these years, what has been the most profound thing you've come across?
I suspect the most profound thing is the control they have over a lot of the things we do. When I was 14 years old, I was in school and wanted desperately, I have no idea why, and it would, again, some thoughts put in your mind to do this. I was in school, and on the second story, Alamogordo High School, junior high, and I had this tremendous desire to leave school that very instant and go out in the desert where I often went to hunt and so on. And I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't, violate my parents' rules, go to school and all that. However, that was Friday. Saturday morning, grabbed my little .22 rifle and went out in the desert to the exact place I knew to go, and found myself standing there in the hot sun. And I can't figure out why my head's so hot. Why the sun's burning down on me? And I didn't realize that until I opened my eyes, I'd just been brought back. And I'm standing here with a .22 rifle, 17 rounds in it, and I opened my eyes, and there's the alien walking away from me. The same guy that always picks me up. I call him the cosmic pizza delivery guy because we're the pizza. And he's walking away, and I again snapped to consciousness too early. I'm not supposed to see him, and he's walking away. As soon as I thought, what is that? He hears my thinking, and he turns around, and he's scared. It's the first time I've seen fear on his face ever in my life. He realized at that point I had a gun. I could shoot him. I'm a very good shot. I could have shot him and killed him instantly, but I didn't. But I chased him, and later he disappeared. But I looked in the sand and saw his tracks. I wasn't imagining anything.
Have you, in all your studies, come across something that just baffled you so much it was almost frightening for you?
I have. There are some contact events are far worse than I would like to admit. not just the mutilations. Those are beyond horrific. We got mutilation cases of even children in Texas.
Yeah.
There are things like that they kind of don't make any sense when you think it. People say, well, the aliens are they're a million light years ahead of us. And I said, well, according to Dr. Bob Wood, he asked me that question, how far are the aliens ahead of us? And I said, I hate to answer that because it's going to sound crazy if I had to. And he said, tell me. I said, Dr. Wood, they're no more than 15 to 50 years ahead of us. And everybody started laughing, except for Dr. Wood. He looked at me stunned, and he said,
he knew what you were saying.
Said, those are the exact figures that I came to based on the back engineering tech information I have. They're not that far ahead of us. I said, no, they're not. That's a ruse.
They should be.
They should be, but that's not the program.
Let's take some calls for you.
It would absolutely amaze you to know what we have tech-wise. We've captured ships that have crashed. No question about that, since the 30s, maybe even earlier. I could tell some stories on that alone. The point is,
that's a whole show all by itself.
We have the tech. Is it back engineered? I don't think that it's nearly as back engineered as we think. I talked to a NASA engineer today about it. He said that stuff is it. He said we really don't know. I said in about 15 to 50 years we would, and he said, yeah, sure. I said, thank you. That's the point.
Welcome back to Coast AM. Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, is the world's leading expert on alien abductions. His 38-plus years of field research has focused on physical evidence and led to his groundbreaking discoveries of alien implants and alien fluorescence. As a former military police officer and CIA operative, he has a unique insight into the alien organization, which he believes functions similarly to an intelligence agency. He's a very close friend. We work closely together. He's a frequent guest on not only Coast to Coast, but Fade to Black. And I'd like to welcome back to Coast, Daryl Sims, the alien hunter. And Daryl, welcome back. But normally I would say, how have you been? What have you been up to since I saw you last? But we just spent the weekend together. You came over to the house and had dinner with Rita and myself, and you brought Jolene with you. And it was an opportunity for me to sit with someone like you with your experience and background. We sat there for probably 6 or 8 hours, one-on-one, and just talked. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. And I want you to share a couple of things. 38 years. How has things in ufology and abductions started to change, and where is it at today, and what's different now than it was in 1972?
Okay, Jimmy, the difference between back in the 70s and 80s is radically different. There was I went to one UFO group one time, many years ago, and I'm telling you, they had a car that had a UFO, like a plastic UFO model, a giant one, glued to the top of their car. And I met another person at a conference, Tim Bike conference years ago, back in the late 80s. That lady claimed to be Princess Sharula. And she was from some planet, of course, and she claimed to be 300 years old, and met a guy named Shieldo. I guess that was her boyfriend, her counterpart. He was from some other planet. Anyway, they started getting older very rapidly, and everybody realized that was kind of a scam, and they took off. There were honest people back then, but there were also some weird, strange people back then, too. Today, it's much, much better. You've got good organizations, good people, and serious researchers out there. So this is really quite a change now.
You went to India. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of background for the audience really quick. It was about a year ago, and you told me about this upcoming investigation, a research project, and surgery, a hopeful surgery at that time, that you were going to do in India. And I want to say this correctly, the enormity, the importance of this particular case was extreme. It had all of the elements in it. And you were able to actually get things going, go to India, perform the operation, remove the object, and get back here to the United States, which you have currently in your possession, this latest implant. Now, if you could share with everybody how this happened, how you were contacted, and how important this actually is.
I was contacted initially by two of our researchers in India. These are two young guys. One of them is named Hitash, and the other was named Shivash. And they made initial contact with the lady and felt like the case was very, very good. And they contacted me, and I had numerous meetings with the lady over the phone, over emails, and finally, after she filled out our forms and went through the testing we did with her that we could, I was pretty impressed with what I heard, and it's enough that I was willing to spend about $5,000 and go to India and meet the lady there and set up the surgery. And that's exactly how it all started.
Where was the implant located?
The implant we located, there were several actually, but the one we were going to go after was one that was very pronounced, and it was in her shoulder. This was amazing to me because it was real, super obvious. And in fact, the lady brought up the question: why in the world would they put it where you could see there's something obviously there? And I said, in my opinion, that's the one that we're supposed to find. That's the other two that are deep and in other places that we probably are not supposed to look at.
Where are the other two?
The other two is one is in her knee, in the patella area, and the other is in her side.
Right side or left side? And how deep?
It's on the left side. Excuse me, if you're facing her, it's on the left side. It's on her right side, on the actual body. And it's pretty deep. And again, I think the reason for this sort of thing is because they don't want anybody looking at that one. But we intend to get all three of them. The next surgery, I hope to get the other two.
How confident are you that this is alien?
Well, I'm confident that her experiences are alien and that most people do not go through surgery from 1 to 3 times because they made it up, or B, because they just want to go to surgery. That just doesn't happen. The confidence level I have in the individual lies in the fact that she's number one, a professional. Number two, that there are multiple contacts in the family. It's familial. It's in the family lineage. And when this individual has an experience, such as the time when we had the surgery, other people in the family knew about it because the alien made sure they did.
The surgery was videotaped, right?
The surgery was videotaped. I met with the surgeon, told him exactly what I was going to need, and I said, I don't want to sound offensive here, but I've done this 24 times before, and it's my 25th case. I said, so I need you to follow these instructions as close as possible. And the owner of the hospital was present, and he was interested in the money, and the surgeon was just fascinated. And after a while, in my opinion, he's kind of figured out, oh my gosh, this is going to be fascinating. So he kind of figured out this was alien related.
The doctor, the surgeon.
Doctor himself. Yes, the surgeon. He had the biggest smile on his face and said, if you ever come back here again, he said, please let me number one, know what you found. And two, he said, I would love to be able to help you with this.
Now, I've seen the X-rays. I've seen photographs of the object. I don't know how to put it into words for the radio audience, but I think of the movie Alien with Sigourney Weaver, to be quite honest with you. Can you describe what the object right now looks like?
The object is located in a very gray biological mass that surrounds the metal object. The purpose, in my opinion, it has been in the past, the gray biological area surrounding the cocoon, so to speak, surrounding the metal object, is designed for the body not to be able to find it, to notice it. And if it is consistent with what we've had with other implanted objects that are alien, we will find that the gray area, so to speak, surrounding the object is a non-inflammatory response to the object itself. In other words, the body doesn't even know it's there. It didn't just wall it off. It doesn't even know it's there, because if the gray matter is consistent with what we found before, the gray matter is in fact keratinous material that literally comes from the surface skin like a scoop mark, and the implant is wrapped in that and then inserted in the body, so the body won't even recognize it as a foreign object.
How big is it?
The object is about a 1/4 inch long, and of course the biology is about 3/4 inch long, because I had them to remove all the surrounding biology that could be connected in any way, nerves, and any other biology that could be connected, because we want the pathology to study the biological part of this, independent, of course, of the metal.
Now, the abductee or contactee abductee that this implant was removed from, does she remember how it was implanted in her, and is she conscious of that?
The lady is conscious of the implantation, and it's the whole thing her whole story is just so stunning to me. Like I said, normally I don't say, well, I think I'll just spend $5,000 and go to some other foreign country just to retrieve this. The story was just, there are parts of her story she couldn't have made up, because there are no references to it in the literature. Some of the things that she describes, I knew from my own experience, and I knew from my over 1,700 cases worldwide. I knew that this was just off the charts, and it was extremely compelling to me.
How taboo of a subject is this in India?
The subject is so taboo that, to put it very mildly, she told me, my family members don't think I should investigate about my implant and abduction experience. That is a minimal statement. They were not pleased in any way, shape, or form.
And tell the audience about the monkey people.
Okay, the fascinating thing is that the brother initially had made statements many years ago that the monkey people were talking to him, and of course everybody thought, well, but that's kind of weird. But no one said anything. The reason they didn't say anything, in my opinion, is because they had similar experiences. Well, the problem with the monkey people story with the brother is he finally ended up under psychiatric treatment for schizophrenia for the last 20 years, and started behaving really weird, and claimed that the monkey people were talking to him telepathically, and now controls his actions. And I responded to and I later met the brother, very, very kind, very, very soft-spoken, very good and very gentle young man. And I was stunned, and I had to wonder about this case. In other words, suppose you had such an experience, and these strange monkey people were talking to you telepathically, and you couldn't stop them from communicating with you. And of course, you think you're nuts after a while. And then later they came along, and the doctors saw this. Then they medicated you, and then you keep hearing the voices that they're still there. In other words, let's take for just a second a very strange circumstance here, and this is very rare. Suppose these events are real, and now they medicated you, and now you can still hear them, and literally the medication only makes you docile, so to speak. In other words, you've been medicated for something that in fact is real, and now you're a psychiatric patient, and the events in fact are real, because they're real with the other members of the family who are 100% sane and very sharp, very coherent, and many of them are extremely educated people in the family.
So that wouldn't alter your memory, in other words.
Exactly. Not only didn't alter his memory, but the fact is that other members in the family are contacted by the quote-unquote monkey people. Now, for your audience, the monkey people are the imagery of a monkey, you should think, first of all, about the large black eyes and the size of the entity. In other words, small, about 3.5, 4 foot tall maximum, with large black eyes as an example. And when you think of this, you're looking at you're imagining a screen memory. This is a false memory syndrome where the alien has actually taken an image and inserted it in your consciousness, and it often comes from possibly your religion or possibly some other imagery you're familiar with. In this case, in India, the monkey image is a creature called Hanuman, and it's a god there, and he's a very friendly, very kind, very affectionate being.
With this is why I find it fascinating, Daryl, is that the subject of UFOs and abduction and aliens today in the modern culture in India may be taboo, but yet the Vedic text and flying machines and vimanas go back millennia and further, actually. And it's one of the root sources of a lot of modern alien technology and flying machines. And it's kind of a paradox, isn't it?
It really is. Jimmy, the fascinating thing about India, and I studied this before I went and after, and long before, and then, of course, after I got there, Subhash and Hitesh took me to a number of different places, and we looked at all kinds of amazing things. To me, I could just see how the UFO imagery and the UFO history was embedded in the entire society, in the museums, in the architecture, and various different things. It was just astounding to me. The history was it was all over the place. The amazing thing to me is how the people, quote unquote, don't see that. In other words, you don't go around India and talk about UFOs and flying saucers and this sort of thing to everybody there. But if you talk to them in terms of the gods that they have, their ancient gods, and that history and the flying machines they were in and so on, now it makes sense. You can talk normally about that.
Now, and immediately after, and help me on the timeline here, but immediately after the operation, weren't you contacted from the family and they said that the monkey people had come back?
This is the fascinating part of it. We had I've seen strange things happen in the surgery stuff before with the abductees, where they're either contacted or told not to do it, or they get this ominous feeling of you shouldn't be doing this, you're interfering with us, and so on and so on. So I'm thinking, well, this will probably happen again, but I didn't say anything to anybody. Well, the wonderful news was that instead of having the surgery a day or two later, we had it the next morning, and somebody had misscheduled it, and so, literally, I got there that night, late that night, and the very next morning, we went to surgery. So the surgery happened before it was supposed to. So they, in my opinion, if they were going to get angry with somebody or do something, they didn't realize that it happened too quick. So we went to surgery that morning, got it removed, and that night, something really amazing happened. I decided I ought to type a great deal more information in my notes on my AirMac computer laptop, and I opened it up. Thing's brand new, never had a problem with it. Opened it up, and it black screened on me. And I can hear it working, but I can't get the screen open. So I'm writing hand notes at this point, thinking that's really stupid. And I'm not much of a conspiracist, so I just let it go. And the next morning, the lady comes to me, and she is very, very upset and says, last night she mentioned the exact time my computer screen went blank. And I said, okay. She says, I got a phone call from my relative, and they said the monkey people were waking them up in strange dreams and so on.
All right, Daryl, we've been talking about India and the monkey people, but I want to shift things back over here to the United States and some of the current cases that you're working on. And certainly there is this interesting case that you've been investigating with Terry Lovelace. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, Terry is a fascinating man. He's a 58-year-old retired lawyer, former assistant attorney general, a 6-year Air Force veteran, undergraduate degree in psychology, doctorate in law, spent 7 years as an adjunct law professor, and he is an alien abductee. And on top of all of that, he may possibly have an alien implant. At least some of the doctors are talking privately behind his back about the strange things they found in his legs.
Now, it reminds me of some of the other politicians and public figures that have come forward, and it's very rare that when they do. But certainly Terry now, of course, pedigree and education and government service and so forth. For somebody that high level to come forward, have you ever experienced that before, and how important is that?
Well, that we have experienced something similar. He is, in my opinion, the highest level of attorney that's come forward by far. I mean, he is it. There is one other case in Wisconsin where a DA noticed a UFO outside his house and asked his wife to come get in the car with him and follow it around. They ended up abducted. And in fact, I have his watch, which was melted from the inside. And both of them experienced alien abduction, and they actually fill out a report for it. Now, of course, that's not going to get you reelected probably. But my point is that people like Terry have come forward and have literally laid it on the line because their events are real. I'm telling you, this case is something you could make a movie off of. It's better than Close Encounters, I'll tell you. And the reason it's better is because the whole story is true, to the best I can determine. And the fascinating thing is that she starts describing the Nordics that came through. She said, at first I thought they were military from the U.S. Army. Now, that's fascinating because some people will describe, quote unquote, it's like the military got me. The military did it. And yet, after she gets past that, again, screen memory, then she sees the beautiful blue eyes of this Nordic female and other Nordics that were present. And they told her, you have to go meet are you ready for this? The aristocrat. And she said, that was the exact word that I was told. And then they took her to a reptilian alien who had of the highest authority. And anyway, this guy was like the boss, period, on this massive craft.
How did she describe him?
She describes him as what I refer to in my presentations, and I'll refer to it again at Roswell this year on July the 4th, as a transgenic being is what she's describing. He was half human and half reptile. Because in my view, these aliens, quote unquote, are transgenic beings made, hatched, cloned, manufactured, and constructed for the purpose of interaction with mankind.
Now, the object that was removed, how confident are you that it is the original object? In other words, the chain of custody, you were there present when it was removed in surgery. Did you watch it get placed and given to you, spirited out of the country here, and it is the same object that was removed?
The object has got an excellent chain of custody. We filmed, I not only filmed the surgery or had it filmed, but I actually made sure that the filming was done while after the object was removed, and then the nurse placed the object in the special container and in formalin, and then handed it directly to me. And it's been in my possession ever since. So we have an excellent chain of custody.
And you said earlier, this is important, that what was inside is metallic. How did you determine that?
Well, we can determine that the object appears to be a metallic based on the fact that it is that it's extremely radio opaque in the surgery, and this is by description of the doctor involved as well. This is in fact a metallic object, and it's very radio opaque. And we have not removed the biological containment yet, and I will do that with a specialist that I work with that's on my team here in Houston. I have removed every biological containment on the implants that we have, and I'll do that one as well on film so that everybody will see that not only the chain of custody is good, but even the surgical removal is accurate. And then we will separate the biology, send the biology off to pathology to see what's there, independent of the metal, and then we'll have the metal as checked and established as well.
Now, this is your 25th, so you have experience with 24 others. Is there a similarity? Is there anything that you can look at and cross-check to determine that, you know, each is an implant and how the others are similar?
Very, very good question, Jimmy. The reason that we're confident that the procedure is the same as the other people that we've worked with, where we found the object was in fact extraterrestrial in origin. Number one. Number two, the biological containment around the object was in fact a non-inflammatory response. Again, if that is true, that's consistent, and it's the dense, dark, very gray color, just like the material on this one. We're looking at the same thing. The question is, what is it exactly? We'll know soon enough when we get the evaluation done.
Now, Terry's, and this is what's interesting here, Terry's objects, or his implants, or suspected implants, I should say, are located in his leg. How common is that? And have you guys X-rayed Terry's leg?
We do have excellent X-rays of Terry, and Terry's got a series of objects in his leg. He's had a previous surgery before, so we're obviously looking at that. But what we're more interested in is the fascinating objects that. There's a couple other things that don't kind of make sense. There's a large floral collection of objects there, which could be simply calcifications. That's entirely possible. What interests me is not what I think, but what his doctors are saying. I mean, the doctors are looking at his X-rays, and they're talking in little quiet tones over there by themselves. They won't let him hear. And he said, "Hey, I'm an attorney. You don't talk behind my back about my medical business." And they came over and said, "We've never seen anything like it."
What do you do to confirm that somebody has an implant? Because is it possible that you could have an implant and not even know it?
It is absolutely possible you could have an implant and not know it. Simply, if number one, if the object is deep inside you and you've had a procedure but you don't remember it or don't recall it, you could certainly not know that it's there. Again, these are very rare. I want to stress that to your audience, because every time somebody talks to me and they've had a real abduction experience, every one of them think that they are in fact have been implanted, and that generally is just not the case.
When you were sitting next to me the other night over at our house, I could have probably pointed out 3 or 4 or 5, maybe in a dozen spots on my body that are irregular, right? And and to get that paranoia about your own body and start thinking, hey, this could be something strange, is something that anybody can do with themselves. And how common is that? And where do you want people to just stop the panic and stop the paranoia? Is there a way that they can check at home?
There are several things that they can do, Jimmy. And first of all, the paranoia is a correct word, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the person. It just means if they've had a unique experience, such as alien abduction or contact, even not even abduction, but just contact. That makes people worried about what was done, what was left in me, and maybe nothing was left in you. It's very probable it wasn't. However, if you were physically touched by an entity, literally physically touched, something unique happens. In many, many, many cases, it will leave a fluorescent trace. In other words, think of it as alien sweat or alien fingerprint. Whatever it is on their skin, it will, if they touch you, say, with 3 long fingers, you're going to see 3 long fingers under a black light on your wrist or wherever they held you down. And this will be a very brilliant fluorescence, and it'll have a particular nanometer length that we're looking for. This is kind of a telltale sign to the individual that, in fact, there was a contact. And once they see something like that, they generally freak out.
And what should they do if they do find something like that? What do they do?
Well, you call the alien hunter, of course.
Right.
If you contact me if you've had alien experience, and at my email, And you just go to alienhunter.org and just simply touch the Alien Hunter image lettering there, and it will send me an automatic email. But the thing is, I will send you some forms that tell you how to look for the fluorescence, what we're looking for, what we're not looking for. That if the fluorescent comes off, that if it does any certain things, we don't want to hear about it because it's not what we're looking for, and we'll tell you what we are looking for. And but generally speaking, there's a whole procedure there for you to even take a sample of the fluorescence.
Now, I can only imagine, Daryl, that walking around in your bare feet as a kid, everybody's got stuff in their feet. We've all accumulated that. But when it starts to be in a different location in the body, that's more interesting to me. Where's the most common location for an implant? The implant in India was in the shoulder. But you hear about stuff behind the ears and the neck and different locations on the body. For you, where should somebody look first? Or if they have something at a specific spot in their body that maybe they should think about it.
When I first talked to several doctors about this early in the early 90s, that's the first question they asked, where would these things normally be found? And I said, actually, in different locations of the body, but the most prominent is the nasal passage. This was certainly my case in 1960. I remember the event consciously. I've never had hypnosis or anything else to recover this information. And by the same token, the lady in India that has the same ability, she has remembered a vast amount of this consciously.
What do the objects look like that would be in a nasal passage? I had a guest on Coast to Coast last month. We talked about this, and he had something about the size of a BB fall out of his nose. Have you ever come across anything like that?
I have, for sure. The fact is that we've had a little girl that told her mother, and she's whining and crying, "Mommy, Mommy, a strange little man with large black eyes came into my room, and he did something in my nose." And of course, the lady called me, "What do we do?" And I said, "Same thing I told you in the workshop." Have her sneeze into a Kleenex. And she did repeatedly, and she said, "Oh my God, I found 4 little tiny gold spheres." And she said they're about the size of a pinhead. And the mother lost those 4. They were so small, she got playing with them, and they fell off on the carpet, and she lost them. She said, "But that's okay, Mr. Sims." She says, because about 3 or 4 weeks later, she calls me again, and the little guys came back and did the same thing with the little girl and repeated the incident, and we got those. And I've had them looked at the University of York University in Toronto, under the care of Dr. Nick Balakis through a metallurgist there.
Now, the implant that you just removed out of India, now it's here. It's somewhere, in the United States. How do you know that the ETs don't know exactly where that implant is? Or maybe they do.
Well, maybe they do. And it's an interesting thing, and I've only had this happen one time with me, because like I say, I'm not a conspiracist, and I'm not into this stuff. I actually was in Washington State years ago, and staying at a friend's home while I was speaking at a conference during the day, and I had the most awful dread experience that something was near, and I'd had this feeling before. Now, my abduction experiences occurred when I was 4, and they finally ended when I was 17 in a violent experience. My point is that there have been no contact experiences since then.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.